Aloha mai kako, you guys can hear me? Good. Thank you, Jennifer Denetdale, for that talk. That was amazing. Let's give her another round of applause. O Ivalani Haya he wahine, no ia George O'Neill Cooper he kane. Hanau ia o Catherine Haunani Cooper he wahine. O Haunani Cooper, no ia Bernard Kaukaohu Trask. Hanau ia o Mililani Trask he wahine. A hanau ia o Onauna Trask he wahine. O Onauna Trask, no ia Gordon Kainoa Sharp. Hanau ia o Kalaula a Trask Sharp he kane. O va o Kalaula a Trask Sharp. O ke ia makua hine, Mililani Trask. Aloha mai kako, and welcome. My name is Kalala Trask Sharp. I am a junior here at Dartmouth, and Mililani Trask is my auntie. She is a Kanaka Oiwi, a Native Hawaiian woman. What I just shared is Mililani's mo'oku'auhau, or genealogy. For Hawaiians, genealogy connects us to our home, speaks of who we are, and is the means through which we draw our mana, or power. Mililani Trask comes from a lineage of outspoken Hawaiian leaders and carries that power of her ancestors with her. Mililani's mana is also derived from the genealogy of events in her own life. After receiving her JD from Santa Clara University in 1978, she immediately went to work in her community. In the 1980s, Mililani founded Ka Lahui Hawaii, a grassroots political initiative which spearheaded the Hawaiian sovereignty movement in the 80s and the 90s. She has worked as a delegate and has testified at the UN on a number of human and indigenous rights issues, and has been central in founding multiple international organizations such as the Indigenous Women's Network. Currently, Mililani acts as an advisor to Innovations Development Group, a geothermal venture which seeks to use culturally appropriate business models to bring clean energy to Hawaiians and put Kanaka Oiwi in charge of their own resources. Like all speakers presenting today and tomorrow, Mililani does not just talk the talk, but she walks the walk, and has stood on the front lines against American militarization and the bombing of our islands, against the construction of highways and telescopes on our sacred lands, and against the eviction of Hawaiians from their homelands. The list of Mililani's achievements is far too long to describe here. She is a mana wahine, a woman of exceptional power and respect, and continues to be a backbone for Native Hawaiian resistance against neocolonialism. So without further ado, may we welcome to the stage my auntie Mililani Trask. Aloha.
Aloha. O wau o Mililani Trask ke ia, ke ki hanau ka aina, he Hawaii au. I say to you aloha, I am Mililani Trask, child born up from the land of Hawaii. I am Hawaii. Following contact, when the white man came to Hawaii, they had a habit of meeting people and asking them, who are you? And they were looking for a name. But the response they got is, he Hawaii au, I am Hawaii. Ke ki hanau ka aina Hawaii, child born up from the land of Hawaii. After that, you would give your name. But you would never identify yourself first as an individual. You would first say, I am Hawaii. Not I am a person from Hawaii, but I am Hawaii, he Hawaii au. Because there was no separation of the understanding of the person from the aina and the land. All are the same. And it gives you a little feeling about the cosmogony of our people, and I know for many of yours, that we were sentient beings and creatures of the land, but not separate. And it is what distinguishes us from others, and certainly from dominant culture. Because we have all been victims in one way or another of our Western education, I anticipate that most of you here don't know anything about Hawaii's history. And I'm just like you. I went through the Western system, I went through law school. You know, what we learned about American history certainly didn't say a darn thing about Indians. Other than that, there were some skirmishes, and the US got over it. We did learn that the American Constitution came from the two-row wampum, but by the time you get into American history, there's only one canoe that's sailing down the river. The indigenous canoe somehow got taken out of the water, and put on reserve lands that were actually federal trust lands. Hawaii, although the Hawaiian peoples are one of a category of 3 classes of Native American, Hawaii is not part of America. Hawaii is nowhere near America. Hawaii is thousands of miles away in the Pacific Ocean. Hawaii is an archipelago that is the northeasternmost island archipelago in the entire Pacific. Our regional affiliations are Polynesian, Micronesian, and Melanesian. These are the indigenous groups that live in the Pacific Ocean, which is the largest region of the world. The largest region, not the continents, not land bases. You pull out all the continents one by one, put them in the Pacific. They will all sink because the Pacific is much, much wider. But through our education, we are given minds of continental colonizers. So it's important to distinguish among the regions of the world, because now we have a growing understanding as indigenous peoples that we need to come together to protect our cultures in ways that we never thought, in ways that our grandmothers never understood. They would never have been able to conceptualize what is happening with the theft and modification of genetic resources. But these are the things that we're dealing with today. And we're not going to be successful unless we understand that we have things in common, political issues and human rights in common with all indigenous peoples of the world. And in that way, we are one family. We are one ohana with great diversity. Here we look at the beautiful cultures of indigenous peoples. So we cannot limit our thinking to the boundaries of the Western education we have. And I know that you all are coming from one of the finest universities in America, one of the finest acknowledged in the world. And an Ivy League school that, interestingly enough, was founded on a commitment to educate Native American Indians. What does that mean? You will be the ones to determine that. You never allow the university to define the curriculum when it is your culture. You know, I've walked in the halls of the United Nations for many years, and I have worked with indigenous students from all over the world, some who had no education, Maasai and others who came because there was a seat for indigenous for Africa. But given your unique status as an Ivy League school, I have to wonder why it is that there's not ever been a voice coming from this college, and why there is no curriculum that gets you a credential and brings you into the United Nations. Because that is where you must be as ambassadors of your people. And that is what you are. Don't ever believe for a minute that you're really a student chasing a paper degree. You are here because there is a calling for you. Very few indigenous peoples of this country will sit in the chairs that you are in. Creator perhaps has selected you to acquire these skills. That is why we look upon you as the leaders of our people. You will be the one to carry this in the future. When the British colonizer Captain Cook sailed into the Hawaiian archipelago back in 1778, he encountered a thriving native culture with over 1 million people. 1 million people resided in the archipelago of Hawaii. We were completely self-sufficient, food and energy-wise. By the time of the illegal overthrow of our kingdom, our independent nation, by American gunboats, which happened in 1893, our population had gone from 1 billion to 12,000. That means 888,000 had died in a very short period of time. We had a few small skirmishes, but what killed us was the disease of the white man. There was no warning or protection. And our historical data indicates that there was an understanding from seeing what had happened with disease in other indigenous peoples in the world. They knew that there would be no resistance. And so colonizers, not only from the US, but others, helped to import diseases so that they could control the native population. And this was something that happened also in Indian country. You know, when I learned about the pestilence in the blankets, it sounded just like what the plantation owners had done with us. There's some things that most people don't know about Hawaii. Hawaii is the landmass that is the furthest away from land in the world. Whether north, south, east, or west, there is no place more distant than Hawaii. And it was for that reason that our culture remained as it was for millennium. We had only the voyaging. And the Hawaiian voyagers sailed by the stars and by learning the highways of the sea, the tides. They sailed throughout the Pacific, and they went to the continents. So we were not as early impacted as other indigenous peoples. One of the interesting things about our culture is that our culture was matrilineal. All matrilineal cultures, all matrilineal indigenous cultures were wiped out by colonization. There is not a single indigenous culture that was matrilineal that survives to this day that is still matrilineal. So when we hear Jennifer talking about going back to what we were, it means, ladies, that you have a special obligation to come to the leadership role for your peoples. When we say that we were matrilineal, it was so in every respect of society. When the Hawaiian kingdom was overthrown, it was Queen Liliuokalani that was overthrown. When you look at our history, the chants and the prayers, what was recorded, and the oral traditions that we have, you find that Hawaiian women played a significant role. We know now that in many indigenous cultures, certain categories of traditional knowledge were in the keeping of women. In Polynesia, all knowledge relating to inshore fishing and gathering was in the keeping of the women. The men took the heavy canoes and went out to bring the big fish in. But it was the women who gathered from not only the plant life, but the animals, fish, crab, and other things from inshore. The same thing is true with regards to cultivation. We also have found that in indigenous cultures, in many cultures, the healing folks, the healing ones, the doctors, the traditional medicine holders, were women. And I believe that it arose because women gave birth to children. And that was a significant physical event that could take both the life of the child and the mother. And so you had special medicinal practices that evolved. And that's why it is very common in indigenous cultures where we find that the women are knowledge holders of what we call la'au lapa'au, the healing with the medicinal herb. It was not the only form of la'au that our people practiced, but we also had la'au, the healing through prayer, through the spoken word. But through the medicinal herbs, these things were in the keeping of women. In time of war, Hawaiian women chiefesses went to battle with the men and were slain on the field with the men as well. When a Hawaiian woman chiefess was slain, her partner stood there until her partner fell. And the same thing, when the chiefs were slain, the chiefesses came and stood with the body and fought. When you look at our history, you can see that there was a balance. when I look at the gender problems we have today, it's interesting that in matrilineal traditional cultures, we seem to be able to maintain a balance without having a battle of the sexes. But in the Western cultures, there is always this. It's interesting that in the indigenous cultures, they could understand matrilineal society. I once attended a discussion, and I was so blessed to have some of the Indian kupuna there, the Indian women elders, and they talked about the special relationship of mother to child. And it was their belief. It was Janet McLeod from the Northwest, Salmon Struggle, Arlene Logan from the Seneca Nation, who were in this conversation. But they believed that the reason why indigenous peoples could have matrilineal cultures and not have it break down into a sexual battle between men and women was because indigenous cultures cherished always the relationship of the mother to the child, and never was it broken until the time of colonization. We should be very proud for that. The Hawaiian government, we lived in a traditional way until Cook came in. We very rapidly were westernized. Of course, we became Christian, and there were many Christian sects that came from the US continent and some from Europe to baptize our peoples. And so it was in this way that we were Christianized. And that is the case to this very day. The Hawaiian community is still very Christian. We, in the last several generations, have gone back to some of the traditional practices, especially when it comes to prayer. So we're greatly blessed in that way. If you are not a native speaker, at least take the time to learn the prayers in your native language, because they are keys. That is how I am, because the missionaries outlawed Hawaiian language, and so it was lost to our peoples. And in the last generation, Maori created Ko Hangareo, a project to bring native language back to the children and to the adults. And when the Maori came to Hawaii for a political convention, they helped us. They have Ko Hangareo, we have Pu'unanaleo, because we're both Polynesians, and you can hear the likeness in the language. It took us about 25 years fighting in the state to get a law passed. Hawaii is the only state in the Union that does not just have English as a state language. In Hawaii, we have two official languages. One is English, and the other is Hawaiian. That was a battle in the state. Took us 25 years. The legislature was so relieved. When they passed that law, they thought they would never see us again. But the year after they passed the law, we all came in demonstrating again. And we're telling them, if Hawaiian is the language of this state, then you must begin to teach it in the Department of Education system, yeah? Because if not, you see, you are violating the US Constitution, which says that everyone has the same and equal right to an education, yeah? And that took about 10 more years, but we finally were able to get a Hawaiian language school on every island. We, in my family, swore that we would carry that struggle forward. So my mother was a native speaker, but not fluent, and we were raised without that knowledge. But we told ourselves that we'd be the last generation of Hawaiians that could not speak our language, and that is something that we made good on. All of the children in our family are fluent speakers, including Kalaiola'a. That's why he introduces his auntie, because I'm still not able to recite the full genealogy. But when you have gray hairs, there is leeway given to you. And you have to assert your right as a kupuna, as an elder. Some other things I thought you should know about the Hawaiian people. We are the indigenous peoples of the world with the largest numbers of multilateral and bilateral treaties. from the time of King Kamehameha III to the 5th, we executed over 30 international treaties. We have treaties with several with the United States, with the Brits, Japan, Russia, Switzerland, Belgium, Allemagne, which was the name of a part of Germany that at that time hadn't yet become Germany, Sweden, Finland. How did this happen to us? If you look on the map, you have Asia over here and North America over here. And in the middle, you have Hawaii. So when the colonizers and the discoverers sailed out, they were both trying to cross the ocean. They came to Hawaii. Our strategic military location was noted early on by the US. And now that we have our history researched, we know that for 50 years prior to the overthrow, there was a concerted plan, the US State Department, to come and overthrow our country. When Hawaii's government was overthrown in 1893, the civilized world screamed because Japan had sent their princess over. They wanted to marry so that they could get into the archipelago. The British Queen was the godmother of the Hawaiian prince. Hawaii is very close to the Brits. In fact, if you look at the flag of the state of Hawaii to this day, you see the British Union Jack up there in the left-hand corner, not the American stars, but the British Union Jack. And if you look at the colonized history of the Pacific, you know Fiji, Tonga, Australia, New Zealand, they were all part of the British Crown. Well, the US saw that and was not happy, and the US then enunciated what became known as the Tyler Doctrine. And the Tyler Doctrine was a statement to the world that America was defining its global jurisdiction and that Hawaii was there, the Philippines, Cuba, Haiti. During that time, America cast a broad net and identified for all of the other imperial powers of the world what they considered to be theirs. Every treaty that we had, with the exception of 2, were treaties of friendship for mutual respect, benefit, and trade with every country that came to our shores. And that was our way, perhaps a mistake, but the keeping of the teaching of aloha was gifted to our people by Creator, and it is our culture to carry it on regardless. And so when the colonizers came, treaties of friendship were made with them, and their boats were given provision. And when they came speaking of their Creator, they were welcomed in. But in a short time, they were collecting what they called the idols of the natives, and they were all taken up and destroyed, and our belief system in large part replaced by Christianity. If it wasn't for Hawaiians, we wouldn't really have postage stamps. When all of that trade was happening, the white colonizers were dripping wax on paper and putting a seal down, the seal of the king. But when trade began and all the countries, China, Europe, were sailing, problems arose because people didn't communicate with each other. On the continents, in the US continent, they had guys riding horses, carrying mail bags. And this was a situation during the period when they all came to Hawaii. And so the ruling monarchs of Hawaii brought together all of the Europeans, the American government, and said, don't you think it's time that we devise a different system? This resulted in the first multilateral treaty in the world. It was called the Postal Union. And Hawaiians showed them, because we had marks on our clothing, that they could make their mark. British, your mark here. France, yours. And what they called it was a postal system. That's how stamps came into agreement, being. They weren't there before. It was a Hawaiian who created it. The other thing you probably don't know, but which I'm very proud of, if it wasn't for our people, there wouldn't be rock and roll. I'm a graduate of the Kamehameha School for Women. It is a school that we had to defend. Right on. We had to defend this because one of our princesses, when she passed, she left her legacy to create a school for Hawaiian women, Hawaiian men, Hawaiian children. And later, under Western law, it was challenged as being racist. But they were not able to persevere. The alumni of the school said, give up the state and federal kala, the dollar, and keep the schools Hawaiian so that we can at least perpetuate that and regain what was lost. Well, in our school in the beginning, we didn't really have a lot of academics because there was great missionary influence, and so we were trained to do things like repair cars, be electricians and plumbers, and it was more like a trade school. And it wasn't really until many years later Hawaiians themselves stood up and said, why is it that the white children have different form of education? But one of the things that happened at Kamehameha was the body shop for the car repair. And they had electrical equipment in there. Everyone knows that Hawaiians love music. In fact, when Hawaiians play and sing music, all things stop, and it hooks to your heart and brings you in. So you know the boys were not down there welding the cars. They had brought their guitars, and they were thinking, what should we do? What if we plug this in to the electricity? This is how the electric guitar was made. The slide guitar and the electric rock and roll guitar. If it wasn't for us in my high school body shop, there wouldn't be any electric guitar. There wouldn't be any rock and roll. So the world owes a great debt to our people. In presenting my talk, I looked at the topics and I thought about the name and what we were doing. And I thought to myself, it would be a good thing to talk a little bit about the way that I perceive the political work that we are all called upon to do for our peoples. How do we understand it? And I think it's a good time. I always try to talk with the youth about it because you're in a very critical time in your life. You are here to choose a career, perhaps. You're all thinking about that. You're all being trained in that way. So as we consider the careers and our commitment to our peoples, to our cultures, how do we put those kinds of things together? And the way that I have looked at it is that I have looked at it in terms of the political spheres in which we live as indigenous peoples. And there are 4. These I sometimes refer to as the spheres of self-determination. But self-determination is not a right of governments, and it's not a right of businesses. Neither is it a right of individuals. Individual people do not have human rights. Collectives of people. When you read the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the human rights binding treaties, the human rights conventions under international law, they give rights to peoples with an S. That's us. Cultural collectives. And when you look at the greatest of those political rights, which is the right of self-determination, you see clearly that the first job we have to do is not dealing with the colonizer, but dealing with ourselves. The first arena of political work for indigenous leaders is native to native arena. This is the work we do with our own peoples. This is the work we do with those who are Kanaka Maoli. And secondly, it is the work we do with other indigenous peoples. So we have many Polynesians. They are part of our regional family. We have indigenous cultures in each one of the 7 regions of the world. Yourselves here North America, we have Canadians as well. In the far reaches of the Northern Circumpolar Conference, in American side, Inuit, Yupik, and Inupiat. Our peoples, our cultures, and we're called upon now to work together because we're living in a shrinking world beset with poverty and violence. And we who are the indigenous collectively were placed here as the guardians of the earth and the keepers of it. The earth is threatened, our mother, and so we are called upon to rise up in her defense. In this undertaking, we are all one family. And that is why I'm so proud to come here to speak to you, because really we have many things in common that perhaps we have not considered. In the first arena of self-determination, it is the business of the native peoples dealing with their own and making treaty and binding agreement with other indigenous peoples. The work in this area is the work that we have to do ourselves. It is our calling to strengthen and create our nation. And there's not a single indigenous nation that wasn't terribly impacted by colonization. The indigenous national structures we have now are not always loyal to the obligations of care for the people. And that is why we need leadership to come forward to assume that mantle of responsibility. I know some of you may be thinking that you would run for public office, but first look to the strength of your own indigenous government. Is it caring for the people? Is it providing rights for all, or just those that are straight? Is it addressing the problems that we have at home? And we don't have to be ashamed. I'm not, we're all indigenous here. We all know the situation of domestic violence, addiction, even violence against our elders and against our keiki, our children. These are pressing issues that social workers from the dominant society are not going to be able to address in a culturally appropriate way. So first arena of sovereignty and self-determination for us is looking after our own peoples, looking after our health problems, bringing back to cultivation our traditional foods, bringing back our healing practices, and also pursuing self-determination. When you look at the international definition of the right of self-determination, it is the right of all peoples. It is collective. It is the right of all peoples to determine their political status, and by virtue of that right, to freely pursue cultural, economic, and social development. That is the definition of it under international law. But all these many, many years, hundreds of years, the colonizing dominant society that created international law, that followed international law, all knew what self-determination was. But the indigenous peoples of the world were never given human rights. We didn't get human rights established until 2007, when after a 22-year battle, we were finally able to get the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples passed. Prior to that time, we were not considered peoples, because only peoples have human rights. So where were we? We were ethnic minorities. When they stole our land, we became displaced populations. But minorities, populations, and every other word other than peoples never applied to us, and that's why we didn't have human rights. That's why we had to go there and fight at the UN for 22 years until we got it. When I was in high school in the 60s, they were saying, think globally, act locally. Well, that doesn't work. Because if you stay in your local neighborhood, in your little island. You don't go up there to confront the power brokers in Washington, D.C. and over in Geneva. There is no political arena that is so far or so powerful that indigenous leaders will not be admitted. And if you come to such a place in your life, kick the door in. That is what we had to do in Geneva. Why? Where does it begin? Self-determination, the right of all peoples to determine their political status. Well, what does that mean? It means that Native peoples have a right to define who they are as citizens of their own nations first. The great Indian nations of the continent are not things of the past as long as there are resilient citizens that ensure that they are alive. Some are federally recognized, some are not. Hawaiians are not federally recognized. We have tried for many years to congeal a nation. Very, very difficult. We have many groups in Hawaii, and more they call for independence from America. They want secession. You know what secession means in America, yeah? Biggest war America always fought. Americans will kill their own children. That's what the Civil War was about. So secession is a very dangerous term. Independence is a very dangerous thing when you're indigenous and you're somehow tied to America. But the first sentence of definition of self-determination, the right of all peoples to determine their political status. We have to do it. We have to ensure that our native nations are strong and that the agenda before them is truly the agenda of the peoples and not some guys that are trying to make a quick buck off of gambling or what. And I'm not opposed to gambling, but what I see of it doesn't always benefit the people. So what happens after you determine your political status? You have your nation. You always work to strengthen it. You never get to a point where the nation has completely achieved what it needs to do. It's not possible because the future brings new things and new challenges, and we have to accommodate and adapt to it, just as indigenous peoples always have. But beyond the question of self-determination and political status, why do you have it? So that you can freely pursue cultural, economic, and social development. Well, what does that mean? Social development is health care for our people, education, housing. Our human right to determine that, our obligation to provide for it. Economic development, is it going to be the capitalist model? Or will it be something that is sustainable for the earth, for ourselves? Will we give up our native diets, start eating in ways that give us diabetes? Or will we cling to the food sources we know, the traditional medicines? We need to not only ensure that they are propagated, but that they are pure and not modified by genetic contamination, which we have huge problem with in Hawaii. Hawaii is the capital in the United States for genetic engineering. Monsanto and all of them are there. They totally control the island of Molokai and the island of Kauai. It's totally under the American companies that are pushing the GMO agenda. And my research showed that it was actually done for the very reason that they didn't want to do dangerous genetic research on the continent, because when the winds blow and the rain comes, the waters and the winds themselves distribute genetic contamination. And so a decision was made years ago that the U.S., with the help of the government, would target Hawaii to be the home for GMO. So, when you think about where your careers are going to go and what you're going to do as a leader of your people, first arena of sovereignty, native to native, we take care of our peoples. We look after our lands, our territories, and resources. When you read the Declaration, oh no, In the beginning, states were saying, oh, you're really fighting for your land, aren't you? No, sir. That's a clear answer from the Pacific. Pacific is water, the largest region in the world. We are that. We are not solid. Every human being is 80% water. We know this, peoples of the Pacific and Atlantic. We're close to the earth in that way. We're made from the same thing as the earth. We're water people. So it is not land, lands, territories, and resources. Resources for food, resources for development, minerals, timber, the things we need. They're the same things that are being commodified on the Western market. But our nations, our leaders, need to ensure that our lands, territories, and resources are protected. And we're called upon. This is a great, great fight now, because the nations of the world, the states, are dividing up the earth. And they're trying to say that there is ownership of things that could not possibly be owned. We are guardians of these things. It's not possible to be owner of the Pacific Ocean. Not now, not in the past, and certainly not in the future, but Western states don't seem to understand that. So arena number one, native to native. How we defend what is ours, how we work with our peoples, how we ensure that our native government is responsible, how we guarantee that we will preserve what is sacred and keep that at the heart of our nation while we accommodate new things that we must learn. We cannot go back in time. So we need to understand concepts such as genetic modification. And in the Pacific, we speak out strongly against it because it was in the Pacific where the first 2 patents on human life were taken. The first patent was taken from the Hagahai people. They're from PNG, Papua New Guinea. They didn't perfect the patent, but they perfected the first step. Because the Hagahai people and many peoples in the Pacific, because I think we were so far away from other contact, that we have physical differences. You know, it's like the Hagahai. I think you can have any kind of kidney, liver problem. Other human beings have, they just don't have it. They just don't have it. It's not unknown there. The Solomon Islanders are the same. And when their genetic material was identified to have certain immunities, they moved for a patenting on the Solomons. And that was when we had to raise hell about it. And I'm so thankful that many who are not indigenous came with us to stop that. But in terms of the natural world, genetic modification proceeds. We were able to stop the Terminator technology. That was a big threat. It was coming from the Monsanto people. But you cannot have that. Technology that sows genetic material and whichever living species picks it up cannot reproduce. It's the kind of things that Nazi Germany was doing research on during the war. But that is a great threat because genetic modification and mutation jumps between and among species. So you might be trying to terminate a weed, but it will kill every plant of that species. And so we had to fight that, and we stopped that. But we didn't stop the rest of it, and it continues to be a concern we should all be aware of. So here's some of the issues we need to look at. Arena number one, native to native. Work that we do with our people and with others. But the second arena, native to state government. The third arena, native to the federal government. And the fourth arena, the international arena. For those who are not federally recognized, it's important that we look at the native to the state government relationship even if you are federally recognized, you know that a lot of your problems with regard to your territories and resources are coming from the states. If you look at the evolution of the law relating to Indian water rights, the whole thing evolves because of fights over water. City-states didn't want Indian neighbors or reservations to have any water. It was a fight over resources that goes on to this very day. That is how Indian law emerged. It did not come from Indian people. It came because it was imposed by the dominant culture who didn't know, who were not indigenous. And this is why there's great conflict when we deal with states and the federal government. But when it comes to understanding state government, working with state government, we need indigenous peoples to be there. They're the ones running the Department of Education. So they're the ones that have to accommodate the teaching of native language. In Hawaii, something very interesting happened when we became a state. Hawaii became a state in 1959. It seems like it was just yesterday. I was not born in the state of Hawaii. I'm 66 years old. I was born in 1951. So I wasn't born in the state of Hawaii. I couldn't have been. State of Hawaii didn't come about until 1959. I was born in the United Nations Trust Territory of Hawaii. And that is why we have business to do up there at the UN. It's supposed to be decolonizing. Well, people think that decolonization has already been achieved. But you know, if you come down to the Pacific, we still have American Samoa. We still have French Polynesia. What are they doing there? It's the old colonial model that is still alive and well. So in the second arena, we have to deal with our non-native neighbors that are within the states. And it is not just recognition that we need, but really to protect our land bases, our resources, and for us to go after our entitlements. When Hawaii became a state in 1959, the federal government was tearing their hair out because of problems with you guys. They knew by 1959 that the natives were restless on the continent. They were looking at big mistakes that had been made. They took the native people, they put them on federal reservations. Well, by 1959, they realized that some of them had oil, gas, shale. They began to be regretful. So along comes Hawaii statehood in 1959. The US goes, we don't need any more natives. So Hawaiians were given to the state of Hawaii in a status of wardship. Hawaiians are trustee. Our trustee is the state, not the federal government. Something else happened in Hawaii too. We don't have any Hawaiian reservations. The Congress created a Homestead Act and set aside 200,000 acres of barren lands, rocks, and cliffs. And that became the Hawaiian Homelands Act. But in 1959, when Hawaii became a state, the federal government gifted the Hawaiian Homelands Act to the state, along with our people. And the federal government did something else. In the state of Hawaii, the public trust is set aside for the public and the native Hawaiian with the small n. This is American law. There's two kinds of Hawaiians. The small n, Native Hawaiian, and the large N, Native Hawaiian. The small n and the capital N. When you see the small n, that refers to those of 50% blood or more that can demonstrate it with the paper of the white man. You have the birth certificate, you show that you are 50% blood, then you are entitled to Hawaiian homelands. If you cannot show the paper of the white man, or you're a quarter blood or 45% blood, then you're a capital N Hawaiian. So you see there's two kinds of Hawaiians, and they have used this against our peoples. And when I talk about the Hawaiian homelands, I always tell them it's 200,000 acres of rocks. Where are we with Hawaiian Homelands Trust? Right now, 30,000 families dead waiting, 21,000 currently waiting, and the vast acreage of Hawaiian homelands leased out to non-Hawaiians for commercial uses. So there really isn't any reason for us to fight over who's going to get the barren rocks, because all you're going to do is get a place on a list. You're going to die waiting there. This is why we need strong Native nations and human rights standards up there in Geneva. This is why. The federal government in the third arena, I don't know what to say, what has occurred now. Probably our one and only president that will ever come from Hawaii. The guy gets up there, of course he's not Hawaiian. They start accusing him of being an imposter whose father came from Africa or something. But now we have President Trump. We don't know where this man is going, but we do know one thing. He's moving for business, and he's moving for the oil industry in a big way. He will come after your reserves because it is on your lands that oil, gas, and shale exist, not on ours. When we look at the changes in the first 100 days, my God, we have the mother of all bombs being dropped in Syria. We come close to war. And now Kim Jong-il and Trump are trading nuclear threats. Not a good sign for us. We need to be in the Congress. We need leaders to be in the Congress to steer this country away from disaster and to prevent America from returning to a period of colonization where Indian resources and valuable minerals were up for grabs and sacred places destroyed and desecrated for the kala, for the dollar. Great, great strife comes to us, I feel, with the coming of this president. Great strife. And I think that there is fear in the hearts of many, not just in the U.S., but the whole world was aghast when the election happened. I happened to be in New Zealand, my God. The people in New Zealand were terrified. Their headlines came out that Trump had won. You know, they predict that there will be war, global war as a result of this. We have a lot of business to do in the third arena of self-determination and sovereignty. I can say that we by working together, I believe that we can have a significant impact in the national arena. And I say this because when you look at the populations, the numbers of Native American, Alaska Native Hawaiian, and the thousands, really there's millions, of others who are indigenous, but we don't see them. If you look at the Native American Freedom of Religion Act, who is in there? Indian, Hawaiian, and Alaska Native. Because America doesn't see all the indigenous peoples of American Samoa, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Federated States of Micronesia. These are millions of indigenous peoples from our region. But they still live under the colonial yoke of the dominant society. And if you go back and look at what happened in the last World War, how did we get two Samoas? When you talk to the Samoan people, I mean, they're so bereft. Their country was divided in half, and they cannot get it back together. It's like what happened in Korea. But what happened was pretty simple. Some people won World War. Some people lost. Free Samoa was under the control of the Germans. Well, they lost. So the United Nations gave German Samoa back to the people. Now it is a free country, free Samoa. But America won the war, so America got to keep American Samoa. And our ally France also won with us, so they get to keep Tahiti. The winners of that democratic war kept as possessions the lands of the Pacific peoples. And so we still have to address this. And that will be one thing that we'll have to take on at the UN as well. We have a lot of work to do in the federal arena. We are the ones who are citizens and who can impact what Mr. Trump and what the Congress is going to do. But I tell you, I don't know what to make of it myself. I mean, it seems like this guy is changing every other week. I'm happy to see that we have a coalition now in the Congress that came together to say, no, you're not going to get rid of Obama health care. 22 million Americans not have health care. But I am concerned, and I want to raise some flags for you all, because Trump has targeted WIC, the program for mothers and infants, and Meals on Wheels. We will lose food for our kupunas, and I'm concerned about losing the WIC program. Many of these programs came through federal legislation. They go directly to the tribes. You need to go home and find out what's happening with that. We do not have a recognized government, so all of our funds for Meals on Wheels for elder and for WIC program for milk for the infants come from community development block grants. NEC is on the chopping block for those funds under the Trump budget. So we need to be vigilant and watch what is happening. Of course, we already know environmental, EPA, they're being thrown out. So we're going to lose a lot of critical allies, programs, services, and benefits under this budget. And it will hit Indian country. We need to be aware of it. In the international arena, the first step took us 22 years. We finally got the declaration written and passed by the General Assembly, 2007. But you know, the Kansas states refused. Canada, Australia, the United States of America, New Zealand, they're the Kansas states. And interesting enough, they're the very states that were pushing the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Pact that President Obama worked so hard to put together. Now, Trump has thrown it out. China applauded. China is a big power in the Pacific. When you look at who controls the Pacific, it's not any countries that are indigenous nations of the Pacific. Who are the power brokers in the Pacific? United States of America, China, Australia, and New Zealand. So when the US stepped out of the TPP, China was very happy to step in. China has acquired quite a bit in the Pacific. You know, the black pearl industry of the world, which has always been in Polynesia. Well, guess what? All pearl market moved to Hong Kong. That's what happens in a globalized world. You think that it is something that is a part of your culture. Why? Because you have cultivated it, because it is in your shore waters. But that is not the case. We need to now move into the second phase for the UN DRIP. 22 years to write it. It's not going to be worth anything unless we implement it. We created minimum human rights standards, our human rights. Now, the next step is to implement those rights, to protect those rights, to defend those rights, and to assert those rights. We now stand on a human rights platform, just like all of the other people in the dominant society. We need to be the ones to move that ball forward, because they certainly will not be doing that for us. So now we can look at what are some of these issues, we look at the 4 arenas of self-determination. We look at the Declaration, which is passed. There are many, many challenges, many challenges. It's very hard to try to set a priority on what is most important. But I do this for myself and also for my peoples that I'm working with. I invite you to do the same. Maybe we will have the same list, because here we deal with the problems that are global. Things like climate change, significant problem, global problem. And it's something that indigenous peoples have a critical role to play in. We're not going to get a full understanding of addressing the needs for climate change without the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples encoded into our cultures. Our knowledge of facts, understandings of the way the earth works for millennium. You know, we've only had written language for a few hundred years. But there are some cycles that the earth goes through. Every 500 years, every 1,000 years, every 10,000 years. That knowledge is in our keeping. It's the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples. That knowledge needs to be regained now and applied to the crisis that we're facing because of climate change. One of the things that we've been doing in Hawaii and with our Polynesian cousins in the Pacific, looking for the traditional foods that are the basis of our diet and our health, and finding the salt-tolerant species. Before the white man came to Hawaii, we had 300 different species of kalo, which is what we make poi from for our food. Then they told us that we only had 25 left. All the rest had gone into extinction. Native planters got together. We started having meetings among all the islands. Within 2 years, we found another 85 species. The scientists had lost it. The guys that were doing big farming, replacing local farming with sugarcane, had lost it. But the native cultivators didn't. We are finding now as we go into our communities, it's the same thing with bringing back the blue corn. When I heard that story, in fact, it was that story that gave us the incentive to go home and say, hey, they told the Indian people that their corns were gone. And guess what? They found it because the native people had it. We went out 2 years, we found 85 more. In each of the Polynesian islands, because the water is rising, we're going to lose Kiribati. We will lose them. We will lose Pacific Islands, the low-lying islands. We're trying to find places where we can transport their people, but Australia, New Zealand, and America will not give land. It's a difficult problem, but I don't want to stray into that and, talking about the cultivars. We have to find these food crops. We have to bring them back. And now in the Pacific, guess what? We have identified and relocated the saltwater tolerant taro plants. They came from the Cook Islands. The Cook Islanders still planting taro right at the shoreline. That is their primary food crop. Because the Cook Islands are so small, they didn't have a lot of land to plant land-based taro. They cultivated the salt taro. And now we bring it out to the other islands. These are some of the things that we have in our traditional knowledge, not only for food, but also for medicine. So we need to look at those things. The big threat on the international, I give you my short form. Number 1 on my list, globalization, structural adjustment. They're trying to cram us all into one economic system. It does not work that way. We have to resist it. Structural adjustment is big bosses of countries of the world with power making rules for small countries, economics, what they can do, what they cannot do, changing the intellectual property regime, so that your knowledge, unfortunately copyrighted by another country, is no longer your knowledge. And they've copyrighted everything. They tried to copyright our people. They're copywriting food species and saying that they own it. They even sent people to Hawaii and throughout the Pacific, the Swiss government, they look for all the traditional dyes, all of the plant dyes we have made. Go back to Switzerland, make patent on it, and try and say that they own it. How ridiculous. It sounds so bizarre. It's hard for indigenous peoples to understand it. But it is happening. And we need to be there. We need to be there to protect what is ours. And because our role is to be guardians of the sacred earth, what do you think guardians do? They take care. So we're not going to have the little plant voices. They don't hear them. They have to hear our voice. And we have to say no to the ownership of life forms. With globalization and structural adjustment, and the World Bank is involved in it as the IMF, what we're looking at is, I believe, a modern form of colonization. It is economic slavery. You think that independence is having a separate country? You go to the United Nations, come to the General Assembly. They have hundreds of chairs. Each one in the front has a little sign. This is England. This is the United States of America. But when you look at the trade imbalance, there's really only 4 or 5 countries in the world. And all the rest of them are economic colonies that are being made to heal by structural adjustment programs. We can't allow it. We need to speak out against it, and we need to oppose it. The other big area I think we're being threatened, energy. Energy is a significant problem, and I'm so regretful to see that Trump is moving. Dakotas, Keystone, and now they're talking about the ANWR. You know, I thought that we had protected the Alaska Native Wildlife Refuge, but it comes up again, just as they're reawakening Keystone. What is driving globalization is a process, a natural process that is coming about because of toxicity in large part from the consumption and burning of fossil fuels. We have to stop it. We have to convert to renewables. In comes Trump, suddenly Keystone is resurrected. Big fights in South Dakota will continue. Human rights being violated, people being jailed there. Not only Indian, but Hawaiian as well. Because for many years, this symbol, you see this symbol? Kukia Imauna. We stand forward as protectors of the sacred mountains. That's why when the Dakotas occurred, our treaties with the Indian nations, which we made Ka Lahui Hawaii. We worked with Oren Lyons. Chief Wilma Mankiller was the one that sponsored the modern treaty signing. All the Indian nations came, and they extend to our people an invitation to come. That time we signed treaties with them to stand up, work together on this. Since that time, it is far and expensive, but when it comes to the protection of the sacred mauna, we have to do it. They trample upon and destroy your sacred mountains and places, they will do the same to ours. They are already doing it. And so we have to rise up against it. That's what happens. Sometimes have to do this. But energy is a significant challenge. We're going in the wrong direction nationally. We're also seeing this occur in the international arena, and we have to do something about it. In our own communities, we need to work for and look for sustainable energy solutions. The reason why I'm working now with geothermal is because in the Pacific, in Hawaii, we have the volcano. The geothermal gives you firm power, 24/7 power. Sun and wind are great renewables, but they're intermittent. You know, you can't support your community only when the wind is blowing. You cannot shut down your community when the sun goes down. You have to have firm power. I support the intermittent power sources. But when it comes to replacing fossil fuel, we need to do it with firm power. The kind of power that comes from Mother Earth herself. That's why 25 years ago, I and all Hawaiians rose up against the development of geothermal using filthy technology coming in from America's war ally, Israel. No, we don't want that. Our minerals, our energy resources, we will develop with clean technology, which does exist, for our people, not for develop huge megawatts for U.S. military based in Hawaii, but for the self-sufficiency of our own communities. This is why I really support these efforts, and Winona herself has been a great spokesperson in this area, really educated and helped us to understand this. The Creator has given us great renewable energy resources. Let us use them. My work in New Zealand, when I went there to learn geothermal from them, all the environmentalists were over there. Say, you know, we have to go with hydro. And New Zealand is a land greatly blessed with hydro energy. But you know what? You put up a dam, all the land upstream is flooded. And all the stream downstream, all the life forms are extinguished. So now in New Zealand, they turn away from hydro and they look to geothermal, where it has a very small footprint, very small footprint. And now instead of disgorging the toxic all over the earth, they know when you take energy from Tutupele, from Grandma Pele, that takes care of that energy. You use what you need and re-inject what you do not. What you take from the earth for your needs, whether it's for fishing or energy, you take what you need to feed yourself and you return back to the earth, because it is the earth that feeds us, yes? And we've said this for years, but only in recent times did scientists understand that when you develop geothermal, you need to do re-injection. Instead of spewing out millions of gallons of toxic water. It is the earth, but it belongs in the depths. That is the place where Tutupele lives, not on the surface. They were too lazy and too greedy to develop re-injection technology. But now, because of our voices, responsible environmentalism, new science, we're turning the tide on that. So globalization first, energy second, climate change third. It's with us and we're going to have to be aware of it. I firmly believe that we can do something to address it. You know, people are throwing up their hands in the air and saying we can't. We can't do it. It's gotten to a point where we cannot change it. I don't believe that. When I look at the resiliency of indigenous peoples, the clean technologies that we're developing, I know that we can do it. You know, if you told human beings 100 years ago that we would have the technology we have today, they would think you were talking about a science fiction movie. But look at what we have achieved, yeah? And where will we be in 50 years or 100 years? That's why we need bright minds in science, indigenous minds, because indigenous minds will look for that technology. They will commit to develop that technology because they have commitments other than the kala, other than the dollar. And finally, you know, I have to speak out against the control and manipulation of genetic resources. We've talked about it. I know that you're aware of it. It's just something that we can't tolerate. It presents a significant threat to our medicinal plants, to our minerals, to the food that we eat, our endemic food sources, and even to ourselves. We ever allow the genetic copywriting, patenting of the genetic material of indigenous peoples, they will develop weapons that we cannot imagine against us. We will not even know. We will be as the ones who thought we were getting blankets because we were cold, because they couldn't see the pestilence that had been placed in those blankets before they brought them to the community. That is how I feel about genetic manipulation. I consider it to be a great threat. And now, another threat, the expansion of protected areas and marine monuments. And this is something that states are doing hand in hand with the environmental community and the UNESCO up at the United Nations. In the last 15 years, huge areas, the majority of the Pacific Ocean has been placed in marine protected areas. The one good thing, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the one good thing I think Trump is about to do, and I say this at the risk of damaging my own credibility, he is coming out and has signed an order to strike down the proliferation of protected areas and marine monuments. We fought Bush on it, but they created the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. It's a monument that surrounds the whole of Hawaii. We cannot fish there, and we're fishing people. Then comes Obama, and he expands it by 600%. Hawaii is a state that is primarily water. When they show you the map of Hawaii, it's island chain. That's not the state of Hawaii. The state of Hawaii is island chain with a giant boundary in the Pacific Ocean. That is the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. The most pristine fisheries of the world are there. But we don't have any fishing rights because we're not federally recognized. Our Constitution in our state says we have a right to fish, but when they declared the monument, they said we have to treat everyone equally. You know, this is America. In the monument, they say that it is to protect the environment, but they don't give us a dime for resource management. They say that they're protecting the fisheries, but they will not allow subsistence fishing for Native people. They kill the entire commercial fishing fleet of our state, and 80% of the fish caught in those state waters are consumed by people in our state. But they will not allow us to fish there. But one interesting thing about the marine monuments, absolute exemption for U.S. military operation. So they can bring in battleships. They can bring in great carriers. And they can fish the waters and feed themselves. And when we asked for subsistence fishing rights, they teamed up with people like the Pew Foundation and the Sierra Club. They told us we would have subsistence rights, and we know what that means. You hunt and fish so that you can feed yourself and your family. That's what subsistence is. But when the law came out, we read it, the word subsistence was not there. Instead, they put a different word, sustenance. What is the definition of sustenance? It means that you can go up to the Northwest and fish. You can eat all the fish you want in the monument, but you're not allowed to bring any home for your children and your people. We objected to that. And you know, they came back and said, look, we don't know what you Hawaiians are complaining about. We've had sustenance fishing for you for years in the first monument, and there's not a single Hawaiian that came for a permit. I told them there's not a single Hawaiian fisherman that will go there to eat lobster and leave their children and their community back home with none. We don't do that kind of thing. But they said, you know, we have to be fair because the U.S. military boats are up there, and they don't have a right to fish and take it home to their children. They just have a right to fish there and consume what they can in the monument. So, you know, we have to be fair and equal. We couldn't really give this to the Native people. I was so disappointed with Obama. We expected more from him. But, you know, he was listening to environmentalists and others. Well, along came Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump is opposed to the marine protected areas, and I believe he will strike them down. And right now, I'm working with Native fishermen, with the fishing industry, and with others to try to encourage the Trump administration to proceed and to do so expeditiously. You also have protected areas in your lands, and they come now to the forefront. President's power expanded under the Antiquities Act. I just go, give me a break, boys. The Antiquities Act was passed to protect things like buildings on land. It was never meant to go into the sea. It was never meant to take away precious areas of Native peoples, but that is what is happening. So I consider that to be a big threat. If you go and look at the Permanent Forum, the Permanent Forum is required to write a report on the state of indigenous peoples globally. I think we have to crank it out every 4 or 5 years. I helped to write the first report, and they gave me the section of emerging issues. And one of the things I put in was the expansion of protected areas. This issue divides us from some folks who have been environmental partners for a long time. But I'm speaking a different language to environmentalists these days. They cannot protect Mother Earth with their environmental values. They cannot do it without the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples. And we will have the resource managers be indigenous. You cannot take the thoughts from our minds, the lessons we learned from our grandmothers, and put them in the pala and give them to a scientist from another culture and hope that they can figure it out. It will not be done. There is only one way to do it correctly, and that is to find those who are the vessels of traditional knowledge, who are the keepers of it. They know the way to plant. They know the way to fish. I tell you this one story. I conclude with this. I went recently to an environmental meeting, and there was this environmental guy. He was a haole. He was talking about what he had learned from his Hawaiian friend about fishing. And he was telling folks that when you go out for the lobster, when you go to find the lobster hole, when you come there, the big eel will be there. The eel lives with the lobster. The lobster does not eat the eel, and the eel does not eat the lobster. But they're always neighbors. And he was telling the fishermen, he was bragging to his environmental friends. I have Hawaiian friends. They taught me how to do it. You go down, you find the lobster hole, you kill the eel. Then you can go and harvest the lobster. Take every lobster out of that lobster hole you can get. You know, when I heard that, I was so angry. I just got up and stopped him right there. I said, I don't know who taught you about fishing, but that is not what is happening. And the reason why our lobsters all fished out in Hawaii and have to sail for hundreds of thousands of miles to the northwest to get lobster, why? Because of people like you who don't understand. The eel and the lobster live together because the eel is the guardian and the protector of the lobster. Well, who is threatening the lobster but the squid? The octopus loved to eat lobster, and the eel loved to eat the octopus. So the eel is always there right by the front door of the lobster hole, and when the big squid comes to take the lobster, the eel comes out and takes care. And so they are neighbors. They have a relationship. I tell you, idiot, you don't go and kill the eel and take the lobsters from the hole. All Hawaiian fishermen know that if you want lobster, you go to catch the octopus. And when you have the octopus, you put it on the spear and you dive down to where the lobster hole is and you hold it out so that the eels will come and take it. You feed the eel first, just as Polynesians have always fed the shark when they go to fish. But when you feed the eel, the octopus, then the octopus is taken, the eel is satisfied and goes back home, and you go to the lobster whole, and you do not take all the lobsters. You do not take a lobster that has eggs. If you have only 5 lobster there, you take 2. If you have 15, maybe you take 5. But if you take every lobster, there will be no more. Hawaiians know how to fish. Indigenous peoples know how to care for the animals in the sea and on the land. Not environmentalists. They have a place. I would keep them there. I would develop environmentalists that are indigenous. But I tell you, I'm so kanalua working with the environmental movement. You know, I have grown to distrust them. You shouldn't let an old lady's anger influence your choices in the future. But I just tell you what I have learned. In concluding, I wanted to recognize and thank the Indian peoples for the support that you have given to us. Many, many years ago, I was a Hawaiian who was opposed to working with other Native peoples. Frankly, we've had it up to here with being called Native American because we are not American. We're nowhere near America. We're not Indians. And right now, Obama has a DOI rule to turn us into Indians by American law so that we can get federal recognition. No, we don't want that. We cannot be that. But we can be allies with Native peoples. We can work together. We have the same colonizer. We have the same dominant society. We have the same Congress, the same president. Let us see what we can do to bring them to bear, to influence what they will do. And bottom line, protect the sacred mana. Protect our sacred places. They are our wellspring. They are the thing that gives us the resiliency that we have. Remember, our peoples were told nothing but historical lies. There's a big lie that many indigenous peoples believe, that our great warriors, yours and mine, are all gone. You look in the photo in the museum, Native American Museum in Washington, Wakine Kona. Their great Chief Kamehameha, the great Indian chiefs are there. But our great warriors have all died. None are left. What a big lie. We have not gone anywhere. You know why? Because Mother Nature herself chooses her children of every species that the strongest will survive. Mother Nature ensures that. That is what the white scientists call evolution. Why are we here? Because we are the daughters and the sons of the great warriors that Mother Nature has chosen to survive. You are the ones who survived unspeakable atrocities, marching people till they died in the snow, killing Indian children and babies. When Winona told me, she went to American Indian Museum, there they had the things from the people that they had killed. Little baby, beaded moccasins. A child was taken for that. We have not died. We have not gone anywhere. We have survived every unspeakable effort to render us to extinction. And unfortunately, they have lost that, and we are here. Now, you young ones, we give the torch to you. Your education will give you tools that will be weapons that you will use to defend your lands. Things that the old ones never learned. You know, I'm still trying to get the computer down, those things. But you folks have those tools, and whatever career you pursue, serve your people, protect your sacred places, and remember, the Creator has given to you a great gift that many do not have, that you are indigenous, that you come from cultures that have survived for millennium, that encoded in them are the teachings of the earth itself, the teachings that we need to survive. I'm filled with hope when I come to see youth such as yourself. Sometimes we are so saddened by what we have lost that we don't see the blessings that we have. Thank you for inviting me to speak here. Seeing your face gives me hope. Sit down. See, this is, we don't have time for question, right?
Yeah, we have a little bit.
Ai mahalo. Thank you for honoring me.
So, yeah, we have a little bit of time.
Jennifer, get up here. We're taking questions. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think we're supposed to take questions if anyone has. You and me.
Okay, well, we can open it up for a little bit of question. We don't have a lot of time because our speaker's got to be somewhere, but 15 minutes, so a few questions.
Thank you both speakers, just amazing, and it's amazing to be here with so many students, and it's been a while for us at Dartmouth, so it's great to be here. I have a question about the UNDRIP, in particular Article 46. It seems that through the whole declaration, all of our rights and are laid out. Yes. and articulated, and then at the end there seems to be this kind of statement that says, oh, whatever they mean, it doesn't undermine the integrity of the state. Is that
Yes.
a way of understanding that?
I think the way of understanding it, and there's two provisions in there that are like that. You're talking about the provision that says that you have these human rights, but they can't be used to dismantle states. The other one is the autonomy provision, which really strikes at indigenous peoples who are entitled to decolonization so that we can be independent. What you identify is two big weaknesses in the declaration, and we need to see where it came from. Political machinations. Even the Nordic states joined in, even Central America that was our ally. But they would not, the other states would not allow the declaration to be passed. And really, that language was written not by indigenous drafters, but by the states themselves. But you're absolutely right. It comes from the Charter of the United Nations. That language is drawn from the Charter, and that's how they got it in. The rest of the language we had drafted ourselves with states and others and human rights. But the UN Charter says that the United Nations as a mechanism in human rights law could not be used as an excuse to dismantle or dissect a state. A weakness in the document, to be sure. The way I look at it, as a pragmatist and as an attorney is, we know what is happening. Western states are falling apart, whether you have the language or not. And when you see what is happening in the world with indigenous and others, they cannot prevent the change. I don't like it because it makes our job a lot harder. But there is not a Western empire that survived. Indigenous peoples' culture survived for millennium. Survived for millennia, hundreds of thousands of years. But the great empires of the world, even Rome, America, they will not last. Their ways will kill them. Their ways will do it themselves. That kind of language is nothing but a joke when you look at their history. But we didn't need it because it is a problem for the non-self-governing territories, and that's why they stuck it in. But all over, indigenous peoples are calling for independence and freedom. And when you look at the General Assembly, you can see they're not independent nations at all. They're economic colonies of the large powers. But you are right, that language is a problem.
You mentioned implementing under. How do you see that happening? How do we take steps to implement under? And do you see a way to take steps here?
We actually moved with the provisions of the in the UN DRIP on language. That's what we used when we moved to change the law in Hawaii and have Hawaiian recognized as the official language. It was 22 years to pass and complete the drafting of the DRIP. But as we completed sections by sections, we took it and we took it home. So the thing is that in the 4 arenas, you identify the issue that you're pursuing and use the language of the declaration, but you're the one making the strategy. I'll give you an example. We had to, in Hawaii, there were environmental laws saying that if you're a developer and you're going to develop this piece of land, you have to do an environmental impact statement. All states have this, environmental impact statement. We went into the state legislature and amended the statute so that they didn't just look at the biological environment, but they had to look at the cultural resources as well. We used the DRIP language to show them that we had human rights to cultural resources and that developers couldn't come and just inventory plants and ants and ignore the fact that there was a sacred heiau there. So we used that to amend that language. It's really a question of what your issue is and how you can utilize the declaration. In some areas, it's been easier to get change. The most difficult ones to implement, though, are not the environmental ones, but the economic. The economic provisions for, so that there is responsible development, clean development, and the right of Native peoples to develop and to identify the method and the manner of development so that we can say we want clean development, sustainable development. Those provisions are hard to implement in government. Others are easier. But the implementation of the DRIP is you see what it says, take it and shove it in their face. When you work with partnerships of others, you come up with good solutions. Even though I'm very kanalua to some environmentalists, they have been our partners. They can work with us. I'm not opposed to science. There's a lot of good and responsible science. And those are the people we need to hook up with, as well as having treaties with each other. But, implementation, we just are beginning now. In the last 10 years, we passed the Declaration 2007, so it's been only 10 years for implementation, but I'll tell you honestly, it's going to be an uphill battle. So some things haven't changed. The mindset of the colonizing dominant society is still alive and well, but I think we're making some progress,
I think for the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission, we've been asked by some local Navajo chapters, which is the local political unit on the eastern side that's affected by fracking. They've come and asked us to help them craft free prior informed consent as the principle from which our leaders will make decisions about development. And so that's an early stage, and we're taking, like you said, taking the language of free prior informed consent and moving towards implementation. So that would also be another example of how we're moving to implementation.
One more question, maybe, anyone? Any questions?
I just want to thank you so much for this talk. I'm just really blown away by it. But could you talk more about other consequences if Trump does get rid of the monuments?
I think I hate to say anything in support of most federal laws, but when I look at the marine monuments, I think that we need to go with the Magnuson Act. The Magnuson Act was passed years ago, And what it says is that the federal government is supposed to work with the states, local fishing communities to put together responsible resource management regimes for the ocean. And we've struggled with that for many years, but in Hawaii and in the Pacific, we kind of worked out a relationship with the U.S. NOAA and Westpac, just so that we could try to do what we could together to protect the fisheries. But you know, it's hard because the federal ship changes direction every time a new captain comes on board. And that's why I'm so kanalua and distressful when I see Trump. You know, but I don't know, he's not coming out against the marine monuments for us. He's coming out for the commercial fishing industry. And there's a lot of others screaming because the industries that wanted to do extraction research on rare earth minerals, manganese nodules underneath the ocean, they were also tearing their hair out about the marine monuments. They want to get in there and they want to do mining is what they're trying to do for rare earth minerals and the ocean surface. But, you know, I mean, my sense is that we've prevented that in Hawaii. We have stopped it to this point, but we cannot give up. We cannot give up our food source. You know what I'm saying? We're in a rock and a hard place, but the thing is you have to make a decision. I really don't know what else to tell you about Trump. I mean,
So this was helpful because about the commercial fishing sweeping in if he does
yeah.
what he says he's going to do.
Yeah, you know, commercial fishing, you have to regulate it. We have pretty strong regulations, but even that, you know, we have regulations regulating the American fishing fleet, but nobody does anything. China sends in dozens of boats, crosses the boundary, and nobody's going to do anything because we have trade agreements. I just go, hey, they're destroying the fishery over here, and small countries like Fiji and Tonga, you know, they don't even have ships that can sail out there. In the Pacific, everything relating to national defense is all under US, Australia, New Zealand. You know, Free Samoa doesn't, they have boats that only can patrol their island. There's no possible way they can go out and find and stop Chinese trawlers from coming in. You know, they're too poor to do it.
Okay,
You know, we're going to be around for the next few days, so we will see the Native students for other questions, yeah?
okay, give our speakers another round of applause.